Good morning. Shannon Johnson, metaphysical facilitator and medium. I haven't done a live feed in a while and trying to wake up for this. Good morning, Teresa. Hi, Matt. Hi, Svetlana. So today's discussion, I almost canceled it because I was kind of like reading my news feed the last few days with all the stuff going on in the U.S. with the Supreme Court nomination. Truth has really gone out the window. But today's session isn't about that bullshit. Today's session is talking about truth. All the different forms of truth and why are there so many different forms of truth, finding your personal truth, being able to speak your personal truth, and what's the difference between personal truth and truth, right? Good morning, Matt and Svetlana. He's so sweet. So, truth. Wow. It's kind of a big area, isn't it? Because it affects so many different aspects and variations for us. So let me talk first about personal truth. Being able to speak one's personal truth can be a big challenge, okay? Like for me, being able to speak up and say I'm a medium or a metaphysical facilitator for people. Especially where I live in the South, that's kind of like start to step back and kind of go, whoa, wait a minute. So I'd have to say, one of the first things you have to address for yourself is being able to speak your truth to yourself. Because if you can't accept the things about you, how are you going to be able to speak it as a truth, right? Because everyone's personal truth is based on the perception of that they see it from. And that comes from our experiences, right? So we could look at a personal truth and it might, you might look at it as, oh, well, yeah, that's something I did, or that's not really who I am. Okay, for an example would be like me saying I'm an accountant. Do I have a degree in accounting? No. I worked for many years in accounting. Yes. So for me, from my personal perception, I see myself as being an accountant. To others, they may look at it and go, but you don't have a degree. So based on their perception from their own experiences, they can't accept that truth from me about myself because to them, these other requirements are needed in order to have that designation. Everyone's personal truth and perception of truths around us come from the kaleidoscope we're looking through. And the kaleidoscope is made from our experiences, what we're taught, our belief systems, the upbringing we came from. Okay, these all influence the kaleidoscope that we're viewing from for any truth that stands in front of us. There's always the old saying, truth sets you free, or there's his truth, her truth, and truth in the middle, right? This makes sense when you think about it, that everyone's perception, definition of truth is coming through the kaleidoscope they're looking through. It all comes from the kaleidoscope you're looking through. What is your belief systems? What were you taught as a child that truth had value? Okay? If you were brought up with people that discarded truth or would tell you, I love this one because my dad used to do this, and it was really difficult for us to understand because we could say, this happened, and we're spelling it out from our perception. And he was one that would go, no, that's not how it was. I'm going to tell you how it was. Right? So then our own personal truth got discarded, and he told us the truth that was from his perception that was to be law. And we've all run into people like this, right? And some of us might even see it in ourselves. But understand that every individual has a different perception of the truth. Another great way to put this, okay, so like I'm the youngest child of 5 in a family of 7. And every single person has a different memory and a different perception of what was true in their childhood. Even though we were a family unit, that we all had similar experiences. We were all in some of them at the same time together. And yet every single one of us has a different perception of what transpired and what became their truth. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of that whole, 100 people in a movie theater, we all watch the same movie, but every single person that walks out of the room has a completely different perception about what transpired, what happened in the movie, what was the theme, what was the underlying messages of it. Every single person will have a different perception of it because every single person is watching through their own kaleidoscope of experiences and belief systems and will walk away with something completely different from the person sitting next to them. And that is one of the biggest conflicts we have in relationships as well, is being able to understand that my truth and perception of the experience is going to be different than every other person that went through that same experience. And yet the truth itself, the facts of it, remain unchanged. The facts of it remain unchanged. That's where truth, standing in its middle, that's where that baseline comes from, because facts are facts, such as my alarm went off at 9 o'clock this morning. That's a fact. It doesn't change. My perception of the truth of that is through my own kaleidoscope. Yeah, the alarm went off at 9 o'clock. I didn't respond to it. I didn't get out of bed till 9:30, right? That was my choices to a factual action. That was the reaction. So being able to accept truths about yourself is one of the hardest areas for all of us to really dig into when we're wanting to heal, when we're wanting acceptance, especially if you're wanting acceptance from those around you, whether it be family, friends, any of those factors, right? And why? Why would that be? Well, first, your truth has to start here internally with who you are. And some of that can be really painful because that means you need to look at experiences that were difficult, right? And sometimes you don't want to look at those. We want to keep them boxed up, stuck in the closet in our head. But by unpacking that baggage and looking at it, healing it, understanding how those experiences ended up serving you to become who you are today, the facts remain, but the perception, and which then changes the truth of it, because personal truth goes through an evolution. Personal truth goes through evolution because you continue to grow and have experiences, which then allows us to look at prior experiences and see them in a new view or a new perception of the kaleidoscope that you're working with. So as you evolve as a person, those experiences can be looked at from a different perspective than when you went through them. And that can change and actually broaden the view of the truth and facts. Facts can then surface to the top, right? And now you have a new view of it, which becomes a new truth. And this is talking personal truth, and we're not talking other variations of truth. We're in a convoluted point at the moment in our society, and truth is getting stomped on. But truth is a very important aspect of being human. It is, right? Because we all have a truth. And sometimes our truths link up, and sometimes our truths pit us against each other. And this is where I ask everybody to stop for a moment when you're being confronted about a truth from someone else. Understand there's going to be multiple views of that truth, multiple perceptions of what that truth meant, what its definition is. Because every single person you're talking to is looking at it from their own kaleidoscope. So then how do you accept someone else's truth, right? Especially if it conflicts with your own. I'm seeing it right now. We're seeing it in a large national community in the USA, and it's being exposed worldwide. We as a collective have decided on variations of truth. Everybody's going into an opinion versus factual truths. We're looking at the perception through our own kaleidoscopes and making decisions and judgments on others based on the kaleidoscope we're looking through. Does that change the truth? No. Because truth has its own context. It's got its own vibrational frequency. But the perceptions of the truth all have different views. Right? So when you can accept your own truth, okay? For instance, going through your life and you had events, people called you names maybe. Maybe there were arguments or labels put on you that you carried for a long time. There's a point in your life that you need to stop and look at those. Because we carry them. We carry them in our subconscious. There's all these labels people have given us, said to us, arguments, conflicts. And we take those labels and we stick them inside our subconscious. And then we were wondering, why am I meeting so much resistance in my life? Oftentimes it comes back to those labels others tagged on us, and we put them into our subconscious as truths. And we begin acting and behaving in a way that makes those truths that others gave us to be true. Is it real? In the moment it is. In the moment it is real for you. And then we have to step back at some point and look at it, dissect it. Is this really my truth? Or is it the truth of others that I've accepted those labels of, and I've been operating from that baseline? When we can step back and take that perspective and start taking the kaleidoscope apart for those particular labels or experiences or whatever the fuck they are, we can begin to see our perception and the facts. And facts stand on their own. They don't need a judgment. They don't need anything else. They just stand there. When we're able to do this, we can change those labels that we accepted, even if it's just a rewording of it, and change it to what is true to you. And once you are able to accept that within yourself, it reflects out into everyone else that you come in contact with. And you'll find that it's also easier to hear and understand, not accept, but understand with compassion the truth of another, even if it's their perception of you. Right? Judgment's not needed. It doesn't need to be a part of the equation. At that point, you are in a place of allowing that the truth will still reveal itself in the way that it's going to be received best from others through their own lens. You don't need to argue it. You don't need to have a fight about it. It becomes its own frequency. And it sits there. And no matter what combats it, it still sits there in its truth. When we look at truth on a community level, it gets very twisted. And this is where facts are important, right? Because there again, you have an entire community of kaleidoscopes spinning their own perceptions. This can be in the media. This can be with your neighbor, your church, your social groups, your closest friends. Doesn't matter. Everyone is going to have their own perception of what the truth is based on their experiences. But truth itself, the factual truth, stands there without any judgment. It waits. It waits for the human to stop and put the kaleidoscope down and let facts speak on their own behalf without the human consciousness influencing it. They are what they are. How we act upon it becomes a whole different line of energy when you allow the space for facts to then clear the glass of the kaleidoscope. Your experiences, your beliefs, all those other things can still be there, but you can still find space to allow fact to stand in its own place without judgment. Facts don't need judgment. Humans prefer judgment. We like to look at it, make a judgment on it, and we move on. Does that serve truth? Only partly. Only partly. I'll look and see what the comments are real quick. I'll kind of figure out where we're going next. Oh, good morning, Tina, and good morning, Wendy, Tara, Kasha. So, even when you're doing a reading, right, you can go to 5 different mediums. Spirit can give the same message to 5 different mediums. And yet, what's going to come through is coming through their filter of interpretation and perceptions. Whenever we're looking at things about truth, the personality wants to judge it. Personality wants to spin it into something that will resonate with the individual receiving it. And the first receptor is often not you. So that's where discernment comes into play. That's where other emotional basis needs to be added in so that when you receive information, your kaleidoscope can bring the meaning and value to it. And yet the truth is still going to be sitting there dangling in a neutral space, because truth is neutral. Doesn't have good and bad. Truth is neutral. And as we know with any kind of energy context, good, bad, neutral. Every electrical conduit has to have a positive, a negative, and a neutral to make the circuit complete. So even in truth, you're going to have all 3 pieces of the conduit. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the factual. Right? And it stands. It just sits there. And why does it just sit there? Because truth does not need justification. Truth does not need judgment, various perceptions of. It has its own frequency, and it's harmonic within its own space. Universal truth, earth truth, they're factual. But understand that every individual is going to have their own perception of it. And the more that you can create that space and allowance that their perception is their truth, you can find ways of rather reacting to it with your own truth to then find the middle space that becomes common ground. Common ground is neutral. has a neutral charge to it. And then there's neither side needing to defend. Does that make sense? When you're needing to, excuse me, it's a ragweed season here. So this is allergies going on in my sinuses. So pardon. It is. Okay. So speaking one's truth. This is a really hard space for a lot of people. And I've really had to look at it a couple of times recently myself because of everything that's going on a collective aspect. And I will say that speaking your truth is more about being able to speak the truth in your own reflection. I'm not going to go out and, be at the grocery store and walking up to people and going, this is my truth, right? You're not going to do that. People ask you, are you comfortable enough? Are you accepting enough of yourself to be able to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes? For me, when I get into one of those confrontational points that I'm needing to speak my truth, and I know it's conflict, I shake, my voice shakes, my hands shake, my whole body is like tremors. And it's not anything wrong with me. It's that natural reaction that my truth will not be accepted, that it's going to receive more conflict. And it's kind of a hard space to be in the middle of being able to go, but this is my truth. These experiences that I had have created my truth through my perception, the kaleidoscope that I'm looking at life through. Right? There's a lot of people in the spiritual community talking about speaking your truth. And I would say this is really about being able to speak the truth of who you are, who you have evolved into through your experiences. Being able to say I'm a healer, being able to say I'm a medium without feeling like your defenses need to go up because you're about to receive an attack. I just did this recently because I was in a situation that I needed to kind of say what I did, but I knew the place I was at and the people I was speaking to. I needed to pay attention to how I worded it in order for it to be received without conflict and judgment. So I was kind of like, I no longer work outside of the home. I instead work in service, providing spiritual guidance to those that request it. Right? So I spoke my truth, but my husband was teasing me about it because he was like, babe, thought you were supposed to be able to say this easily now. And I said, yeah. I said, but the situation that we were in, the energy of it was not going to be accepting of that truth. So I presented the truth of it in a context that would be received. Didn't alter the truth. I presented a truth that would be accepted by the perceptions and the kaleidoscope they were looking at for the other people. And all of a sudden, it clicked for them. Oh, that makes sense. I know the situation presented it to be able to provide a truth that could be acceptable within the context of the kaleidoscope the other people were viewing from, which eliminated the conflict from the equation. This can be done in pretty much 90% of your conversations. And we don't look at it very often because we tend to kind of bind up and we use our own truth as a protective barrier as well. We hold it close. These are my truths. With all of this stuff going on about sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, and yeah, we're going to go there for a moment, but I'm not going to stay here. Okay. It's a painful area for a lot of us. 95% of women, 1 in 3, have had some sort of conflict within this area. The perception of it is different for every one of us. And I started thinking about this because there's more going on within this field of truth, this context, the box. We're going in the box, right? Now, because we all go, but wait a minute, our life contract, our life plan, some of this, didn't we sign up for this? Didn't we agree for this conflict to happen within our lives? My own astrological chart shows it being a factor in the early part of my life, right? Your astrological chart is the cheat sheet to the life plan you set up before you came out here, before you dropped into this body. It's got it. And I kind of stopped for a minute because I was looking at this information and I'm going, okay, why would I sign up for that? I had it in multiple different forms. Okay. My life contract, I kind of went, yeah, let's pick up all these other crazy things. I think I might have to answer that because I'm the only one home. Oh no, I'm not the only one home. Pause. Hello? Hello? Don't you love that when they just call and then they hang up? Anyway, so where was I? Oh, okay. So here I'm looking at it from spiritual contract agreements. And then I'm looking at my life plan and my astrological chart. I'm going, okay, sexual abuse was in there. It was part of the experiences I signed up for. Why would I agree to have that type of conflict in my life plan at an early age in my life? And then you look at what's going on today. And you kind of have that light bulb moment, right? Because this is not something new. And it's not limited to women. Men and women both have had this form of conflict in their life. Men and women both have dealt with this for probably since humanity got here, because I'm telling you what, the animal sex drive with the mental wiring can get very skewed, right? So you start kind of going, okay, from a soul aspect, this was an area that I wanted to explore for a reason. What was I going to gain out of it? What was I to learn? Well, I'm only a 5-foot woman. The men who I had my conflicts with in a couple different forms were all much larger than me. So there was a loss of power, personal power, physical power. There was a loss of emotional power. There was a mindset switch for me that turned from victim to, I don't want to say perpetrator, but it wasn't that I went out and sexually abused men. I just became emotionally unavailable. I turned the switch inside of myself. I closed my heart up and I went, okay, if you as a man, and I'm talking like 18, 19 years old, this switch flipped for me. And I went, you can no longer have my emotions. I'm not going to engage them with you. You are now the tool for my physical release. And that's all you're getting, right? Emotional switch, boom, off. So in a way, I was sexually abusing the men after that point because I refused to have an emotional connection. I had gone from being highly emotionally sensitive, but through the abuse, okay, I had 2 attempted rapes. I had been drugged one night and there was a gang rape of a friend. I was taken out of the room and told that no, I was special. I was taken to another room by the one person that I trusted in the moment, right? I went into other situations with where I felt that I was trusted and safe, and yet I would get taken out of my bed and brought into someone else's and used, right? So for a young person, when you're dealing with something like that, you emotionally shut off. And this is something that people don't realize. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. When these experiences happen to us, we shut off. We may be inside kind of like, whoa, but it's survival mode. It's the animal instinct in us that goes into survival mode. What am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this so that I can see the next sunrise, right? And so then we become this emotionally unavailable person because in those moments, we start closing the doors and locking them and going, yeah, I'm now going into protective mode. And that's something that I did. I changed gears and went, okay, if you, since I'm heterosexual, so my sexual partners would be male, but I took it into the context of now you are going to get used by me just the way you used me, right? It's part of what we do. It's part of the human aspect. From a spiritual side, I was closing doors and I was shutting everything down, right? That way I could go, one night stands, baby. That was my rule. You don't get a phone number. You don't get to spend the night. You don't get anything. I will take you, use you, shove you out the door, right? Emotional slam shut. And yet the spiritual side is going, but the door's still open. When you're ready, let's open it back up. And you end up getting someone sent into your life that then you have to go, wait a minute, this one's not the same as the others because now the view in my kaleidoscope is narrowed in, right? It's going to see all men coming into my kaleidoscope as being the same as those prior experiences. And then Spirit will send you in someone that then kind of shatters one of the glasses. And then you have to regroup and go, okay, is this my truth? Is this really me? And you start to open up the doors again. But what we tend to do is we hold those doorknobs going. As soon as you hit one of those buttons, we're clamming it shut and closing up. Because that's what our kaleidoscope is showing us. And we end up filtering everything through that view, right? But then as we go along, if we're open to it, Spirit will keep presenting other forms of truth. So that way we will stop and look at our internal truth. Those labels that I spoke about earlier, because those experiences, we start tagging it. And that's what we're seeing in the reflection. And then you go, oh shit. Maybe that's not who I am. Let me start to peel those back again. And when we're doing that, what happens to our kaleidoscope? It gets bigger. You got more panes in it. You can see more about what those experiences were actually bringing to the table. Because there's a point that you can either stay the victim and continue to perpetuate the cycle, because Spirit's going to sit there and go, honey, as long as you're still learning, you know, you're taking this test over and over and over again. When we finally stop and can look through it in another context, the truth is going to end up just sitting there without its judgment, without any coloring. It's very black and white. And we're adding our own colors to it. And the colors come from the whole scope of us. So then you can kind of sit back and go, wait a minute. Yes, I will agree. I signed up for those experiences to come in some form. Because when I look further in my life contract, if I look further in the depths of my own astrological chart, I can see that I started my life out with the tools of learning about disempowerment, about being subjugated, about being judged, about having no power in myself. And the goal I've been working towards is about making myself a priority, making myself stand in my truth without a judgment attached to it, about being back in my full power. So these experiences then change because truth, personal truth, has an evolution in your life. As you begin to find these cues, Spirit keeps giving you, you can end up finding that every bit of it, when you take the belief systems and all the other shit out of it, and it stands in its black and whiteness, they were all pointing me towards the goal that I've been trying to achieve, which was self-empowerment, taking my power back as an individual and not allowing everyone else to define it, not subjugating, not even simple things of, going, okay, well, yes, that happened. At the time, I accepted the truth in the moment given to me by others. It's all my fault, right? Through the evolution of my truth, I can now say and stand in my own personal truth that no, it was not my fault. Yes, I made choices that allowed this to come to fruition. I had my part to play within that cycle because this was now going to serve me later in a different form if I was able to take the reins and expose the truth to myself in its starkness, in its neutrality, and allow my own perception of it to now shift and change and grow based on that neutral black and white. Does that make sense? Any of this making sense? I'll look and see what comments we got going on here. Absolutely. Tina asks, Shannon, why do some individuals tend to feel as if they have to defend themselves all the time? Is it a fear of not being believed, and why? That's a good one, Tina. I'm going to say, Tina, I really feel like that one is because they're so not ready to accept the starkness of the reality of the truth that there's an internal conflict that, yes, fear is a part of it, fear of not being accepted of it, but especially the internal acceptance, because it's something they don't want to accept about themselves. So they're going to defend the more shallow side of it to the death, because this is what it has to be in order to justify it to themselves. Because sometimes the starkness, the black and white truth, is so cold and it's such a slap to what they believe that it's easier, it's almost that protective mechanism that it's easier to push that down and allow this one to stand up. And they'll defend it and defend it. And yet, if they really took a deeper look at it, it's going to be painful to accept some of the other parts of it. So yeah, I think that's Yep, that kind of answered your question. But that's how it resonates for me, is that a lot of times they are not willing to look beyond the surface because there's things that are going to be too painful to accept. Yeah. And there's even the fear that it's going to alter what they see as real in the now. We tend to pat ourselves in that protective mode from anything that is going to feel like it rips us apart. And yet, truth doesn't really rip us apart if we're very honest with ourselves about it, right? If we can be in that space that there's many perceptions of it, and yet the starkness is sitting in the middle. At first, it may hurt some, but in the overall scope, you're going to end up finding that you feel better about yourself and about what you've now been able to bring clarity to for yourself than what that perception is giving you. But it takes being really honest in the reflection. And I'd have to say more humans struggle with being honest in their reflection than they do with anybody else. If you can't be honest with yourself, 9 times out of 10, you're not able to be honest with anybody else. I hope that one, I helped out some. Let me know. Yes, dear, I know there's. Okay. All right. Wendy says, agreeing via contract before birth doesn't always make it easy to speak your truth. It's a growth opportunity. Very true. Yeah. And I hope that's kind of what's coming through. Teresa says, abuse teaches you to not only shut down with sexual partners, but every aspect of any of your relationships you come into. Yeah, it will affect all relationships. All. Because this is something we as humanity really need to work on, guys and gals. We are sexual beings, okay? We procreate through our sexual being, but it is more than that. Okay? Sex is a vital part of our health. It is a vital part of our mental health, emotional health, physical health. Whether you're having sex by yourself or sex with a partner, sex is a glorious part of being human. Our souls totally dig coming here and getting it on. Okay? And I know people are going to be like, Channel, where are you going? We're talking about truth. But I think that this is a truth that we struggle with in this earth. When we are in these human bodies, we are not accepting of each other, of ourselves, of being sexual beings. And instead, we've turned it and we have allowed it to become an exploited, dirty, nasty, hide in the closet, don't talk about it, put it under the rug, part of ourselves. And yet it is a vital force of our life energy. It is a beautiful part of being human. It is awesome to have a physical connection with another human being, whether I know I'm going to get into some dirty shit and people, and I may lose y'all on a little bit of this, but I'm going to tell you the animal within us and the soul within us sees this as not just a act, a physical act of release. Why do you think the human body produces oxytocin through orgasmic release, through the joining in the physical essence? You can have down and dirty one night stands, and you may get that high from the oxytocin, but our whole being is always searching for the connection that goes beyond the physical, that makes our whole being just feel like it's electrified. It's a beautiful part of us. But what do? We have children. We tell them, don't talk about it. You're too young to know about that. Oh, your partners will teach you. Oh, you'll learn about that in sex education in school. We teach it as a shame, something to be shamed, something that you need to keep that part of you closed up, right? And by doing that, that's how we're in this boat. That's how all of the sexual abuse, these contracts we signed up for, come into play. And I got to thinking about it the other night, going 1 in 3, right? 1 in 3 for women. I don't know what the number is for men. Because guess what? They don't tell. They're not as emotionally vocal about it as we are, right? But if our sexuality is such a vital force for all layers of our being to be in its wholeness, we need to begin the communication and presenting this part of ourselves in the black and white truth of fact. And if we can get over it and have the conversations with our young people, open, honest, real truth, perhaps what has gone on for centuries can change, because we would no longer be teaching them that this is a part of them to be ashamed about. This is not something to conquer, right? And I'm going to say, guys are wired different than us women. We don't accept that about each other. We all want to go, we're just the other halves. No, we are completely different beasts. We have systems that work in a completely different context from one another. But we're not able to have the conversations. My mom posted a story the other day on her Facebook, and I really thought about this. When they were young, in the 1950s, my brother was born. My dad, Navy guy. Oh, my son! He's gonna be such the lover. He's gonna make all these women happy in his life. He's gonna have all these conquests, right? Think about that. We haven't changed that mentality with our sons. And then they had a daughter. And Dad went, no one better ever touch her. They're going to have to go through me. Nope, nope, nope. She's this pure white essence. And we're teaching this context to our children. You need to stay pure, and you need to be conquestual. Who the fuck do we think the boys are going to be having their conquest with but somebody else's daughter? But you're sitting there in the judgment of, no, women need to be purity, men need to be promiscuous. And as long as we allow those truths to remain, the abuse will continue to perpetuate. And as long as we keep saying, we're not going to talk about the truth of sexuality, the cycle is going to continue. And it will always go into every type of relationship that we have, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship. I have a lot of guy friends, and they had just as much difficulty from my perspective because they were always on guard that if they made a joke the wrong way, that I was going to flip the switch and now it's something else. See? So we do carry them into every perception of where we are. And I have no idea. Did I even answer your question, Teresa? Because I went into but you guys know how it is with me. I just start to go. I'm going to say that is a big area for us women, though, too. Because guess what? We are not honest with ourselves about being sexual beings. We are not honest with ourselves about being able to voice our needs as a sexual being. We see it as something that is only supposed to be in our bedroom. How many women do you know? How many friends out there that you start to look around and go, they are so bound up by the definitions they've been given that they can't even accept their whole being. Isn't that sad? I think that's really sad because every part of us is important. And every part of us needs acceptance. It needs a voice of some form within ourselves. And if we're not able to accept that part of ourselves and the needs for contact, the need for touch, the need to have our own truth heard and accepted for what it is, how can we expect others to give it to us? It's not going to work. You can't expect someone else to understand your truth if you're not able to accept it yourself. Experiences, we can, I look at the charts and the soul contract, I've been looking at mine a little more in depth and my curiosity, really, because I wanted to understand more of why would my soul look at some of these experiences and be excited about it? That's kind of a conflict itself. Really? You were excited about doing that? That hurt. I cried. And yet your soul is like, oh gosh, man, that was some juicy stuff. Couldn't have had that here. And then you kind of look at it and go, well, did I allow it to become my label? Did I allow it to suddenly I had this big victim badge on my chest? Did I begin to move through my life from a position of victim versus looking deeper at my own truth? When you can do that, you begin to go, okay, that label is now gone. And now I can see that experience was teaching me about my disempowerment more. It doesn't change the facts of the experience. The experience is in its black and white rawness, the truth. But now my perception can go through an evolution of growth so that it becomes something new. And yet the original truth of it, it's still there. But it grew because I allowed myself to view it over time through different views of the kaleidoscope of my own perceptions. And that means that black and white truth is still there. The facts of it still exist. But the context has now changed. And I can end up speaking about that truth with a much broader view of it that can now help another person when you're sharing it. I hope some of this makes sense. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here blowing smoke up my ass, right? Mm. Yeah, I didn't show you my coffee cup. I usually do. It's my 50th anniversary, Bugs Bunny one. Let's see, that was in 1990. So Bugs is much older than that now. Anyway, let me see. So Teresa adds that yes, I did answer the question, and abuse does affect every relationship you have, sexual or otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about another truth real quick. Belief systems. That's like a big one right now, don't you think? Everybody, I see it all over the place. Everybody is doing a judgment and a perception of the truth through the lens of their belief systems right now. And it has, I swear, if I were to try to build a kaleidoscope with the multiple facets that are being presented right now, I don't even think the earth could hold the son of a bitch. It would be way too big, right? Because everybody is taking and twisting it and turning it into multiple perceptions of truth from the belief systems. And even the belief systems themselves, the religions, are now shifting their kaleidoscopes to try to maintain a control mechanism and try to attune everyone to one perception of the truth. And it's not holding ground. Are you noticing this? Even in the spiritual community, it's not holding ground. There's this dysfunction going on. And I find it really interesting because many of the belief systems have been kind of in a flat line, right? They've been able to, just stay within this one resonance. And even the spiritual community has been trying to stay within this one frequency. And yet, what we're being exposed to in many, many formats, okay, this is not just a political government or anything like that. I'm seeing it from friendships to large community into cities, nations, and seeing it throughout collectives. That they're trying to maintain their control. The old paradigm is really trying to hold on. And what's happening is there's beginning to be more and more of a conflict in truth based on their perceptions of it and what they're trying to keep as the stable line. It's being challenged in ways that it hadn't had before. And this is a really good thing, okay? It's a good thing if we can move the energy of it to begin to expose the multifaceted layers of truth based on those perceptions, right? Change the energy of it through the multifaceted perceptions of it. Because remember, every belief system has multiple kaleidoscopes of their own, even spirituality. And one of the things that keeps being brought up for myself with my own spirit team is they keep reminding me, don't, just because you gained knowledge, don't narrow that kaleidoscope down into what you see as the final truth. You're going to need to be able to keep all of the kaleidoscope flowing and moving in order for that stark black and white to begin to have its resonance fluctuate out. I know that sounds weird. Sounds weird to me. But yeah, it makes sense because the more that we're able to expose, we are in a period of ripping band-aids off, upheaval, okay? Upheaval of what is no longer serving the greater community. Also means that that starkness of truth is going to need to go through its evolution of the perceptions of it. And all that we can do as individuals is make sure that our kaleidoscope is keeping a wide enough view that we can present the black and white of truth to reach all perceptions. That makes sense? Teresa says, when you become rigid in your thought and belief, you stop growing. To a point. To a point. And I'm going to say to a point because there is, within the context of soul contracts, okay, there are Within the context of soul contracts, there is a space that we reach. If we've gone through our experiences and we're in the rawness of the evolution of our truth, there are many of us that also signed up to be the vocal aspect of the black and white. Okay? And I know I often call them the warriors. They're the warriors that are willing to, that agree to be that podium and expose starkness of that truth. And in order to stand in that place, it's a very difficult spot to be in, okay? Because your energy has to allow the spiral of all perspectives to keep spinning around you. And it can be very emotionally bombarding and energetically bombarding because there's a lot of resistance to it. So that doesn't mean the person that's standing has stopped growing. It means that there being an anchor light to the chaos of the multiple kaleidoscopes trying to bombard it and resist this darkness, if that makes sense. There are some that that's part of a major priority in their contract is to finally reach that ability, because it takes a lot of strength, internal strength, to stand in that space. They can continue to grow on their personal levels, and yet they have to also stay within that stationary exposure of a stark black and white truth in order to be that beacon and that anchor light. So I have a lot of compassion for those people because it's hard. It's not an easy place to be in. And even for myself, I'm moving into that place. And it's kind of, it's a little bit scary to have to look at needing to move into that position. I hope that makes sense. So our warriors, we do need to be supportive of, because it's a harsh, it's kind of like standing within the center, in the eye of a hurricane. You're the eye and the hurricane swirling around you. At least that's how I've put it together for myself and some of the stuff that I've been talking to Spirit about, because it's been a very difficult time going on. We're very much in a conflict phase. We're standing in the exposure period of stark reality and truth. So, any other questions from anybody? Is any of this resonating? Does truth matter? To me, it does. And it's something that we should all stand up for within ourselves, within our communities. You know, we like to talk about the light workers came to change how humanity is working together. And that's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful potential that we're all working towards. But I'm going to tell you, truth has to be in that equation. Truth is the one thing that can stand by itself in its facts. And it's up to us individually in how we view it. Does it matter to you? To me, it does. Just as, you know, I love when people are like, 10 Commandments, right? Or to me, what means even stronger is I made an oath to speak the truth, right? That is being challenged in today's world. To me, I shouldn't have to make an oath to speak the truth. I should be speaking the truth all the time. Granted, I'm not going to walk up to somebody and go, woman, you need to get your hair done. You need to go to a store and find a new outfit, you know, or like you see the jokes of the Walmart shoppers, you know. It's very judgmental. Granted, yes, some of them are pretty damn funny, but there again, you can look at it with a humor and not be judgmental. But that doesn't mean you're going to go up and create a conflict because your truth tells you that she doesn't look right. See, there's a difference. Universal truth has a range of frequencies it can flow in. Earth truth has a limited range that it can flow in because every human has a different perception of its meaning. And then we try to convince everybody else that that's what it meant, rather than allowing a fact to stand on its own. When someone takes an oath to speak the truth, this, to me, is a point of power. And we as a society allow it to be manipulated. If you took an oath to speak truth, that needs to be honored. That needs to be voiced and not manipulated. And we're seeing the dynamics of the manipulation in full-blown living color. So a lot of us empaths, intuitives, every single one of us is. Sometimes what you need to do is close your eyes and listen. Things like the hearings we've all been just saying. Close your eyes. Go back and listen to those testimonies. and allow your senses to step forward versus your eyes. And let the pieces that ring truth, you're going to feel it. You're going to know it. And the pieces that don't are going to be in full face. Because when you close your eyes, the perception is now going into a sensory mode and not off of what you're physically seeing. And truth has a resonance, a frequency that you feel it. Try it. Even when you're working on speaking your own truth to yourself, close your eyes. What do the feelings tell you? You're going to get a different view. Hi, Sarah. She says, our truth is our inner core, our love we have. I speak my truth with an open heart to help others, but in a respectful way, not to force it down people's face. With love, we remove judgments of one or another. And here, Teresa says she loved this. So, any last questions or comments before I sign off and start dealing with the rest of my day? It's a really important thing to work with. But just remember, every kaleidoscope has multiple views, and every person you're interacting with has their own kaleidoscope. But truth sits in the middle, and it waits. It waits to be exposed. It waits for us to acknowledge its existence without judgment, without dissection. It just sits. Let's see. So, thank you guys for showing up today. It was nice to have some peeps and some comments. And I didn't look crazy like I'm talking to myself. Not that I really give a shit anyway. I talk to myself all the time. I talk to Spirit all the time. Why not? But I hope this helped make some sense about why there's so many perspectives of truth, how to kind of look at your own truth and speak your truth. And the difference between how all of us have our truths and what truth is. So, if you have any ideas or topics that you would like discussed, please message me. I'm open up to discussing pretty much anything. I hope a little bit on the sexual aspect didn't ruffle too many feathers for those attending and those who might watch this later. But I really do hope that this is an area that all of us can work towards creating an open space so that we can all be whole in who we are. Don't deny the animal. Bye, guys. Thanks for coming. Loved you all. Namaste.